The distress beacon came from a dead ship. Not a damaged one, not a drifting one. Dead. Every system offline, hull cold, no heat signature at all. It floated at the edge of the Riven's Fork system like a piece of old garbage, tumbling slowly in the dark. The beacon was the only thing still running, and it had been running for 11 days before anyone picked it up. Nora Vassell was 3 hours into her shift aboard the UES Relentless when the signal hit the receiver array. She read the ID tag twice. GCPW Ardent. That was a compact patrol vessel. Third wing. She pulled up the roster. Ardent was one of 12 ships that had gone silent 9 days ago. The compact's official line was navigational incident. A gas pocket near the outer belt. A cascade failure. Very tragic under review. Nobody from the elder species looked particularly sad about it. Admiral Drakel had delivered the statement in the same flat tone he used to discuss supply manifests. 12 ships, 400 crew, and the Admiral talked like he was reading a weather report. Nora had filed a sensor report the day before the third wing went dark. She had flagged an anomalous contact at the edge of the system. A single vessel, no transponder, no drive signature, sitting completely still in a spot where nothing should be sitting. Black hull, unusual geometry. It was there on her screen for 6 minutes and then it was not. No jump bloom, no acceleration trace. It simply stopped showing up. Drakel had read her report and told her she was chasing ghost returns. Now 12 ships were gone, and one of them was sending a beacon. Nora requested permission to intercept the Ardent. Drakel denied it inside 4 minutes. Hazard zone, pending investigation, stay on assigned patrol route. She sent the request again with the sensor log of the black ship attached. He denied it again. She called his direct line and he did not answer. So she went through the Relentless's captain instead. Captain Wen Bra was not a man who moved fast on anything. He was 61 years old, had served 30 years in the patrol fleet, and had developed the particular calm of someone who had seen enough nonsense that nothing surprised him anymore. He read Nora's full report sitting at his desk, drank half a cup of something hot, and then told her to plot an intercept course. They reached the Ardent 4 hours later. The ship was empty, not abandoned in a hurry, no scattered belongings, no emergency suits pulled from lockers, just empty like every person aboard had been carefully removed. The atmosphere was intact, the lighting was on a minimal cycle, the food in the galley was still in storage. But in the engine room the drive core was gone. The housing was there. The mounting brackets were there. The entire core unit was not. It had been removed from the inside. The access panels were open from the interior side. Whatever took the core had been inside the ship when it did it. Bra stood in the engine room for a long time without saying anything. Nora found something else. On the floor of the core room, in the space where the drive unit had sat, there was a small object, roughly the size of a closed fist, hexagonal, made of something that was not quite crystal and not quite metal. It caught the light strangely. When she picked it up, it was warm. She bagged it and logged it in her personal record rather than the ship's manifest. She did not fully know why she did that. Something about the way Drakel had responded to every piece of information she had shared with him made her careful. Back on the Relentless, she ran the object through every scanner they had. The material composition came back as unknown. The internal structure was not random. It had patterns, nested ones, repeating at different scales. Her instruments could read the structure but not explain it. Whatever the object was made of did not match anything in the compact's material database. She sent a single coded message to her sister, who worked in university records on Orion Station. She asked her to look up any research papers about crystalline objects recovered from shipwrecks in the Riven's Fork region over the past 50 years. She worded the message like a casual question. Her sister replied 6 hours later. She had found 3 papers, all authored by the same person, a salvage operator named Davin Cole. The papers were short, technical, and had almost no citations because nobody had followed up on them. The last paper was 22 years old. After that, nothing. Cole had simply stopped publishing. In that last paper, Cole had written one sentence that Nora read 4 times in a row. He wrote, "The objects are identical across all recovery sites, which means whatever is leaving them is using the same process every time, which means it has done this before, many times, and it knows exactly what it is doing." Drakel's office sent a formal notification to the Relentless that same evening. Commander Vassal was being reassigned to Compact Joint Intelligence, effective in 72 hours. Administrative position, they said. Desk work. Bras showed her the notification in his office, and did not pretend it was anything other than what it was. Nora looked at the message, and then looked at the small, warm object sitting in her evidence bag on the desk between them. She asked Bras if she could keep it off the official manifest until she reached her new post. He looked at it for a moment, then looked at her and told her he had not seen anything on that desk tonight. She thanked him, picked it up, and walked out. Joint Intelligence Headquarters smelled like recycled air and old carpet. Nora's new desk was in a room with 11 other desks, most of them occupied by people staring at screens with the focused expression of someone who had stopped expecting anything interesting a long time ago. Her access credentials led her into 3 databases. 2 were nearly useless. The third had a search function. She started with Davin Cole. Cole had spent 18 years as a licensed salvage operator working the debris fields around Riven's Fork. His work history was in the public record: routine recovery contracts, equipment logs, material filing dates. Standard. Then his license had been suspended 22 years ago. The reason listed was vessel code violation, unspecified. His appeals had gone nowhere. He had not worked in salvage since. His address was still in the record. Mining station called Iron Bell, 4 relay jumps out. Nora filed for personal leave. Her supervisor approved it the same afternoon. She used her own money for the transit and did not file a travel report. Iron Bell was the kind of station built in a hurry and never properly finished. Exposed cable runs in the corridors, temporary lighting that had been temporary for 30 years, smell of metal shavings and old grease. Cole answered his door on the second knock. He was in his late 60s, built solid, with the eyes of someone who had spent decades working in places where one mistake killed you. He looked at Nora, then at the corridor behind her, then at her again, and said he was not interested in visitors. She held up a printed copy of his last research paper. He stood there a moment, then stepped aside. She told him what she had found on the Ardent: the empty ship, the missing drive core, the crystalline object. She put it on the table between them. He looked at it without touching it for a while. Then he said he had recovered 31 of them across 9 different wrecks over 18 years. Every single one was the same size, same structure, same material. He had tried commercial scanners, university labs, 2 compact research facilities. Nobody could identify the composition. The compact facilities had taken his samples, told him the results were inconclusive, and said to stop submitting requests. When he published his 3rd paper, suggesting the objects were manufactured, and the wrecks were not accidental, a compact inspector arrived at his station within 3 weeks and pulled his license. Nora asked him what he thought the objects were. He said he did not know what they were, but he knew what they were not. They were not wreckage, not accidental debris. They were placed deliberately in the engine room of every hit ship, in the exact same position after the drive core was removed. He said they were receipts. Whatever took the cores was leaving one behind every time. Same object, same placement every visit. That was not hunting behavior. That was a system. Nora asked how many cycles he had been able to document. He got up, went to his shelf, and came back with a physical notebook. Paper, handwritten calculations. He showed her the dates of every mass disappearance near Riven's Fork going back 160 years. 3 prior cycles, roughly 60 to 70 years apart. Each one took a large number of ships in a short window and then stopped. It was too clean to be random. On the last page, in faded pencil, Cole had written something in the margin long ago. It said, "The Compact's 3 founding species have been members for 200 years. They have never lost a ship at Riven's Fork. Not one. 4 cycles, 0 losses." Nora sat with that for a moment. She asked if he had ever found any record of an agreement between the founding species and whatever operated in that system. He said no, but he had found something close. He went back to the shelf and returned with a data chip. A friend in deep archive retrieval had pulled it 8 years ago, before that friend was transferred somewhere too remote to easily communicate with. The chip held a translation fragment, old text, pre-compact era, recovered from a derelict station near the outer boundary of the system. The translator had done their best with an unfamiliar script. Nora plugged it in and read 3 paragraphs. The first described an agreement. The second described the terms. The third described what happened to species that attempted to exit the system during an active collection period. She read it twice and felt the quiet drop of something she could not unfeel. The founding species had not avoided Riven's Fork by luck or by superior navigation. They had made a deal. They had agreed to direct the harvest toward newly admitted member species during those species' first century of membership. Every cycle that had hit humanity since they joined had hit them, because someone with more seniority had agreed to let it. Humanity had been a member for 89 years. In 11 years, the treaty exemption ran out. She asked Cole if he was safe on Ironbell. He said he had been safe for 22 years, because nobody at Joint Intelligence thought he knew anything useful. She looked at the object on the table. Small, warm, identical to 30 others he had pulled from dead ships. A receipt from something that had been running the same collection route for longer than any living species could clearly remember. She picked it up, thanked him, and stood to leave. He told her to be careful about who she talked to at the compact level, not because they would disagree with her, because they already knew Nora did not go to Drakel's office with a theory. She went with documentation. She had the sensor log of the black ship. She had Cole's notebook, photographed page by page. She had the translation fragment from the data chip. She had the dates of 4 harvest cycles going back 160 years, cross-referenced against compact membership records showing not one founding species vessel lost in any of them. She laid it all out on Drakel's desk in printed form, organized, clear, with a 1-page summary on top. Drakel read the summary. He did not touch the other documents. He told her the translation fragment was likely a forgery. He told her Cole's cycle data was speculation built on incomplete records. He told her the sensor log of the black ship was already in her personnel file, already reviewed, and had been determined to be a ghost return caused by sensor array miscalibration, which was already scheduled for repair. He told her she had done good work trying to understand a difficult situation, and that her new desk assignment was an opportunity to contribute to the Compact's broader intelligence effort. He then asked, in a tone that was not a question, whether she had removed any materials from the Ardent that were not listed in the official recovery manifest. She told him no. He looked at her for a moment and then said she was dismissed. She walked out. She went to the corridor bathroom, locked the door, sat on the floor with her back against the wall and thought for 4 minutes. Then she went to find Petty Officer Rist. Rist was her comms officer from the Relentless, temporarily stationed at Joint Intelligence while the ship underwent engine work. He was 26 years old, from a place called Bremwick on the outer colonies, and he had 2 qualities that Nora had come to trust completely. He was fast with a terminal, and he knew when to stop asking questions. She told him almost everything, not where the data chip was, not where the object was, but enough. He listened without interrupting. Then he asked one question. He asked whether the compact planned to warn humanity before the treaty exemption expired. She said she did not think so. He thought about that. Then he said he had a brother in the colonial fleet. Then he said, "What do you need?" She needed a copy of one specific file from Drakel's personal archive. She had seen the file reference in a footnote in a secondary document she had accessed through her joint intelligence credentials before they were quietly narrowed. The file was titled simply Riven Accord, Original Terms, and it had a date stamp that put it 207 years old. She did not have access to Drakel's personal archive. Rist, as a comms officer with maintenance access for routine signal relay tasks, had a maintenance credential that touched a different part of the same server cluster. She was not going to spell out what she was asking him to do. She just told him what file she needed and where she thought it lived. He said he would look into some routine maintenance. She went back to her desk and did nothing unusual for the rest of the day. Rist put the file on a physical chip and slid it into her hand during a corridor pass the following morning, the way people hand off things in corridors when they have thought about whether to do it and decided yes. She read it that night in her bunk with the screen on minimum brightness. The Riven Accord was not a long document. It was 4 pages. The language was formal, old, translated from whatever the founding species used 2 centuries ago, but the terms were not complicated. The entity at Riven's Fork would limit its collection activity to 1 cycle per generation, defined as 60 to 70 years. During each cycle, it would harvest drive cores and biological samples from no more than a defined quota of vessels. In exchange, the compact's founding species would not attempt to interfere with the collection and would actively redirect the harvest toward member species holding provisional status, defined as species within their first 100 years of membership. There was a clause at the bottom that Nora read 3 times. It stated that any member species that became aware of the Accord's terms and attempted to share that information outside of the Founding Species Council would be in breach, and the founding species reserved the right to address that breach through internal compact disciplinary mechanisms. She put the screen down and looked at the ceiling. She now knew 3 things with certainty. First, the compact had been handing human ships and human crews to an ancient automated system for 89 years, with full knowledge of what was happening. Second, in 11 years, that protection would expire, and whatever came in the next cycle would hit humanity directly, and humanity would have no idea why. Third, she was in breach of the Accord right now, just by having read it. She got up, pulled out the evidence bag with the crystalline object, and held it in her hand for a while. Small, warm, hexagonal, a receipt from something that had been collecting for centuries. She thought about Drakel's face when he asked if she had removed anything from the Ardent. Then she thought about what Rist had said about his brother in the colonial fleet. Then she started writing a message to humanity's civilian government. She wrote it carefully. She wrote it twice. She put it on a chip and gave it to Rist the next morning and told him to get it out through a civilian relay, not a compact channel. He said he already knew a way. That afternoon, MPs arrived at her quarters. They were too late by about 6 hours. Humanity's Joint Fleet Command met in emergency session on a station that did not officially exist on any compact map. The room had 17 admirals in it, 1 civilian liaison, 1 intelligence director, and Nora Vassal, who had been extracted from compact custody 11 hours earlier in an operation that was less dramatic than expected. The compact had 6 guards on her. Humanity's extraction team had used a maintenance access shaft, a falsified work order, and a trolley of cleaning equipment. The guards spent 6 hours locked in a storage bay before anyone found them. The official report from the compact side described it as a security procedure failure. Nobody on the human side corrected them. Nora stood at the front of the room and walked them through everything: the black ship, the ardent, Cole's cycle data, the translation fragment, the riven accord. When she finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then it was not quiet. 11 of the 17 admirals wanted to pull humanity's fleet assets away from Riven's Fork entirely, notify the compact that humanity knew about the accord, demand renegotiation through formal channels, and wait. The argument was reasonable. Humanity did not have the firepower to threaten an entity that had been dismantling compact warships without apparent effort for 2 centuries. Discretion made sense. The dissenter was Fleet Admiral Sable Oren. Oren was 64 years old and had a reputation for being either brilliant or reckless depending on who was describing her. She had commanded a destroyer at the Battle of Callum's Reach, been the only ship to survive when her engine failed mid-engagement, and spent 6 months drifting at low power waiting for a rescue that took longer than anyone expected. She did not talk about that much. She waited for the 11 to finish. Then she asked one question. She asked what they thought would happen in 60 years, when the next cycle came, if humanity said nothing now. There was some silence. She said, "We will have no allies because the compact elder species will still be protecting themselves. We will have no warning because we will have spent 60 years pretending we do not know. We will have no options because we will not have used the 11 years we have now to prepare any." She said, "The accord protects the founding species as long as someone else is available to absorb the harvest. In 11 years we stop being that someone else. If we want a different arrangement, we have to make it ourselves, and we have to do it before the current cycle ends, when we still have standing to be present at Riven's Fork without it being an act of war." The room talked for a long time after that. In the end, the decision was not unanimous, but it was enough. The plan was simple in outline. Send a small team to Riven's Fork on a fast scout, no weapons loadout, maximum sensor capability, with the goal of making direct contact with the entity before the current harvest cycle completed. Not to threaten it, not to fight it, to talk to it, to find out what it was, what it needed, and whether it was possible to negotiate something that did not involve humanity's ships disappearing every 2 generations. Nora would go because she was the only person who had seen the black ship and studied the accord. Rist would go because he was already involved and was not going to accept being left behind, which he communicated in a single sentence that closed the matter. Cole was contacted on Iron Bell. He said he had been waiting for someone to do something useful for 22 years, and he would meet them at the transit point. He brought his notebook. The ship was the UES Cardinal. Fast, small, 2-week range on full tanks. The crew was 8 people total. No weapons beyond standard defense systems, which felt either brave or stupid depending on the moment. Oren came aboard herself, which no one had expected. She said she was not going to authorize the mission and then stay home, which was the kind of thing that sounded simple but carried a lot of weight. They jumped to Riven's Fork in 3 stages. When they came out of the final jump and Nora looked at the sensor screen, she felt something that she did not immediately have a word for. The black ship was already there, sitting in the exact position where she had first seen it 9 days before the 3rd wing vanished. No drive signature, no transponder, just the shape of it against the dark, enormous, perfectly still. It had not come to meet them. It had been there the whole time. That meant one of 2 things. Either it was always there, waiting between cycles, which meant they could have talked to it at any point if anyone had tried, or it had seen them coming and positioned itself. Nora was not sure which possibility was more unsettling. The Cardinal's sensor operator quietly read off the dimensions. The black ship was roughly 4 kilometers from end to end. It had no visible weapon ports, no heat bloom, no active systems that their instruments could detect. It looked like a piece of architecture rather than a vessel. Oren came to stand beside Nora at the sensor station and looked at the screen for a while. She said, "Well, there it is." Nora said yes. Oren asked if Nora was ready. Nora thought about the ardent, cold, and empty in the dark. She thought about the crystalline object still in her jacket pocket, warm against her ribs. She thought about Cole sitting in the back of the ship with his notebook, having spent 22 years knowing something nobody wanted to hear. She said yes, she was ready. Then she told the comms team to start building a transmission. The black ship transmitted first. That surprised everyone. They had their own transmission half-built when the signal came in, a dense mathematical structure repeating on a low frequency, patient and steady, like something that had been sending the same message for a very long time. The Cardinal's linguistics specialist was a young woman named Petra who had spent 5 years studying pre-compact communication systems. She pulled up the signal and sat with it for 20 minutes while the rest of the crew waited. Nobody talked. Cole sat in the back with his notebook open but not writing in it. Petra said it is a query, 3 parts, species identifier, authorization code, and quantity. She said, it wants to know who we are, whether we have permission to be here, and how many we are offering. It was running a collection protocol, the same one it had probably run every time ships came near. Automated, patient, procedural. It was not threatening them. It was not targeting them. It was doing paperwork. Nora told Petra to transmit a response that answered only the first part. Species, human. No authorization code because they did not have one. No quantity. Then she told her to add something. She told her to add, in the entity's own mathematical structure, a simple statement. We know what this place is, we know what you do here, and we are not here to give you anything. We are here to talk. Petra built the transmission carefully, checking the mathematical grammar against the incoming signal to make sure the structure was correct. It took 40 minutes. They sent it. Then they waited. 11 hours passed. The black ship did not move. Its signal kept repeating, the same query on the same frequency, unchanged. It was possible it had not processed their response. It was possible it had and was deciding what to do. It was possible it simply did not know how to receive a response that did not fit its expected formats. On hour 12, the repeating signal stopped. Everyone on the Cardinal went quiet. Then something came back that was not the query. It was longer, more complex, and Petra spent 2 hours working through it before she said anything. She said it was a question, one question. It said, if you are not offering, what are you here for? Oren looked at Nora. Nora looked at the screen. Cole from the back said that was the most promising thing he had heard in 22 years. What followed was not a fast conversation. Each exchange took hours, sometimes most of a day. The entity's mathematical language was precise but not fast, and Petra had to build every response carefully to make sure the meaning translated correctly. A wrong structure could read as a threat, an offering, or nonsense. But it was a conversation. They asked what the entity was. The response was long and took nearly a full day to decode. The short version was, it was a system built by a civilization that no longer communicated with it, designed to collect biological samples and drive core technology from spacefaring species it encountered, and to preserve that data indefinitely. They asked who built it. It gave them a name in a script that matched nothing in any database. It gave them a location for its builder's home system. It gave them the last date it had received instructions. That date was over 4,000 years ago. They asked if it knew its builders were gone. There was a long silence after that one, much longer than the usual delay. Nearly 18 hours passed before the response came. The response did not answer directly. Instead, it sent something different. It sent the Cardinal a coordinate, a single location inside the Riven's Fork system, deep inside the gas giant at the system's center. And then it asked another question. It asked, if a system is built to preserve, and the things it was built to preserve for are gone, does it continue? Cole put down his notebook. He had not written anything in it for 2 days. Nora sat with that question for a long time. It was not a philosophical riddle. The entity was genuinely asking. It had been running the same collection protocol for 4,000 years. And now something was asking it questions it had not been programmed to answer, and it was trying to figure out what those questions meant. She thought about the Compact's founding species, who had found this thing 200 years ago, and immediately decided the best move was to look away and push other people into the path of it. She thought about the treaty they had written to make that look tidy. She thought about what it meant that this thing, for all its size and age and the ships it had taken, had never fired a weapon at anything. It collected, it preserved, it left receipts, it asked questions when questions were asked of it. She wrote the response herself and handed it to Petra. It said, yes, a system built to preserve should continue, but what it preserves and why can change if the right question gets asked. And then she wrote, we want to show you what you have been preserving and what we think it means and what we think you should do with it. But first we need to tell you something about the people who built you. Petra read it, looked at Nora, and asked if she was sure. Nora said yes. Send it, telling a 4,000-year-old machine that the civilization which built it was dead took 4 hours to transmit and nearly 2 days to get a response to. Petra had to build the transmission slowly, making sure the mathematical structure was not ambiguous. The concept of extinction did not have a direct equivalent in the entity's language. She had to build it from component ideas: builders, last message, time elapsed, silence, absence. Each concept had to be grounded in data the entity could verify. She used the date of its last instruction set. She showed it the gap between that date and now. She walked it through the silence. Then she transmitted. They waited. 31 hours later, the response came. It was the longest thing the entity had ever sent them. Petra worked through it in pieces and called Nora over every hour or so to show her what she was finding. The full translation took most of a day. It was not anger. It was not denial. It was something that mapped, as closely as Petra could render it, to the process of checking every assumption you have ever operated on and finding most of them no longer applied. The entity had been collecting biological samples and drive cores because its builders wanted preserved records of spacefaring life, to be held in trust for review when the builders returned. It had been running a return-arrival protocol every cycle, scanning for the builders' specific transponder codes, and every cycle finding nothing. It had logged each cycle's scan as incomplete and continued operating. It had not concluded from those failed scans that the builders were gone. That possibility was not in its original instruction set. It had simply kept scanning and kept collecting. At the end of the translation, there was a single query. It said, what should be done with what has been collected? Oren was standing next to Nora when Petra read that out. She said nothing for a moment. Then she said, well, that is the question. Nora had been thinking about it since the previous day. She went to the back of the ship, where Cole was sitting, and talked it through with him for about an hour. Cole said that in all his years of pulling wrecks apart at Riven's Fork, the one thing that had stayed with him was the objects, the receipts, because something that careful, that consistent, that precise, over 4,000 years was not just collecting. It was keeping records with genuine care. He said, whatever that archive is, it is probably the most complete record of spacefaring life in this part of the galaxy. Every species the thing has encountered for 4 millennia. Drive technology, biological data, trajectory information. The wreckage left behind was just the housing. The thing it actually took was the data. Nora went back to Petra and told her what to transmit. She said, the people who built you wanted to preserve knowledge of life in this part of space. They are gone, but that goal is not wrong. What you have collected is not just cargo, it is a record. We want to help you become what you were always meant to be, which is not a collector. It is a library. She said, We are proposing that you open your archive to study, stop the collection cycles, and let us help you understand what you have and why it matters." She said, "We are not afraid of you. We just think you have been doing the wrong job for the right reason for a very long time, and it does not have to continue that way." Petra sent it. 4 hours later, the entity transmitted the coordinates inside the gas giant more clearly than before, with an access code attached. 6 hours after that, it sent one final message that Petra translated as, "Agreed, pending verification that your species can be trusted with old things." Oren said that was the most reasonable thing she had heard in 30 years of diplomacy. The archive was inside a station nested in the upper cloud layer of the gas giant, built from materials that matched nothing in any current catalog. They were allowed in through a docking approach that opened like the entity was deciding in real time whether to let them through. The inside was vast, cold, and full of storage systems that had been running without interruption for 4,000 years without a single failure. Cole walked through it for about 20 minutes and then sat down on the floor and did not move for a while. The data inside covered over 300 distinct spacefaring species, many of them otherwise unknown, drive core configurations that predated the compact's oldest technology by thousands of years, biological records for species that had long since died out, star charts for systems humanity had not yet reached. It took 3 months to begin cataloging what was there. The compact's response when humanity published the archive's existence was immediate and not subtle. Drakel sent 7 formal requests for joint oversight. 6 other elder species councils sent their own requests. There were accusations of unauthorized contact with a protected system, breach of the Riven Accord, failure to report an intelligence finding through proper channels. Humanity responded to each request politely, and at length and agreed to nothing. Nora was promoted to full commander. Oren retired 8 months later with a ceremony that was shorter than she wanted. Cole got his salvage license back. He did not return to Riven's Fork. He said he had spent enough time there. The entity remained in its system, dormant for the first time in 4,000 years. Every month, Petra sent it a summary of what the researchers had found in its archive. Discoveries made, questions answered, things understood that had not been understood before. Every month, the entity sent back one word in its mathematical language. It translated the same way each time. "Good."